Today's lesson is lesson 63, and it is subtracting a fraction, from a whole number, which we've kind of already done, from a whole number greater than 1. We've already done the 1. So this is subtracting a fraction from a whole number greater than 1. Now, if you can remember a few simple principles, this is going to be a nice, easy lesson for you today. Now, when I say remembering a few simple principles, here's the main thing. If I were to say 21 minus 9, can I do it the way it sits right now? Hopefully you answered no, and I would then say, what do I need to do before I can subtract this? Hopefully you would answer borrow. I would take the 2 and it becomes a 1, and then I add 10 over here. So now I'm saying 11 minus 9, which is 2. 1 minus 0 is 1. So the principle that I want you to remember before we look at the fractions is borrowing. Do not forget, when you borrow, you are borrowing one whole and putting it in the place value over. Borrowing a whole and putting it in the place value next to it. Now when we subtracted from 1, like for example if we said 1 minus 1/3, well, we just converted this. The 1 we converted to 3 over 3. And the 1 goes away because 3 over 3 equals 1. So we've taken the whole 1 and made it a fraction. So 3/3 minus 1/3 is 2/3. Now, in that case, we really didn't borrow. We just changed the form of the 1. What we're going to be doing today is actually borrowing. Now let's start with, we'll say 4 minus 1/2. Now notice how I've lined it up. It is very important that you learn to line up because this is actually a place value marking. This is ones and this is fraction of 1. So you make sure you've lined it up this way, otherwise you're going to cause yourself some problems later on. So in this case, if I were to borrow, I have to borrow a whole. So I am borrowing a whole and this becomes 3. Now I have borrowed one whole and I need to put it into a fraction form. Well, look here. My denominator is a 2, so of course this denominator is going to be a 2. What do I put on top to make it worth 1? So that fraction would be worth 1. Go ahead and write it in. Hopefully you wrote 2 over 2 because 2 over 2 equals 1. Now I do my regular subtraction. 2 over 2, 2 seconds minus 1/2 equals 1/2. And I come to the next one. 3 minus 0 is 3. So my answer is 3.5. So when we do these problems in class, I want you to make sure you're laying them out exactly like I've laid them out here. So, and we'll do a couple more of them just to make sure, but I hope you saw that we borrowed a 1. And when we brought it over, we had to put it into a fraction form of 1. All right, let's do one more. There are 5 pies on the shelf in the bakery. A customer comes in and buys 1/3 of a pie. How many pies are left? Now again, make sure you've laid everything out just like I have it here. Today that's going to be very, very important. Now, I'm going to borrow. So, show me how you're going to borrow from the 5. Hopefully, you just borrowed it and made it a 4 because you're borrowing 1. Now you have to take that 1 over here, and because you're moving to this side, it has to be in a fraction form. How do I know what denominator to make it? Clue. Ding, 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 ding. Hopefully you said 3 over 3. So 3/3 minus 1/3 is 2/3. And 4 minus 0 is 4. So my answer is 4 2/3. Hopefully you're seeing that. I think it'll be pretty easy if you just can keep in mind the fact that it really is borrowing and carrying over, but when you carry it, put it into a fraction form. One last thing we'll take a look at because it's mentioned in your book, and then we'll be done for today. Now with this problem, I don't need you to actually write it in your notes. I just want you to see it because it's going to help kind of with that concept that we're looking at with the borrowing. If you were to look at this picture and give it to me as a whole number, what would it be? Hopefully you said in your head that you would say it's 3 because we have 3 full pies, 3 full circles, whatever you want them to be. Now, if I asked you, could you give me a mixed number for this picture? Well, here's 1, and here's 2, and then you have a half and a half. So, what would it be? Hopefully in your head you were able to say that as a mixed number would be 2 and 2 over 2, because there's 2 halves right here that you have to count in, just like we have 2 halves here. So hopefully you'll see that, because that really is just showing you that that's the same amount. 3 is the same as 2 and 2 seconds. And we could say if we added 1 more in there, it would be 4 or 3 and 2 halves. So you just have to understand, because that's the principle behind when we borrow, because we're just making a whole piece, a whole thing, into a fraction form. That's all for today. I hope you have a great evening, and I'll see you in the next days.